Alright, hi you 12. So I wanted to show you the front page of your booklet and what should be done by now. Okay. So I've ticked everything that should be done, and what should be left should be 19.5 and 11.1, which we're going to do in this video. 15D from Cambridge, which was on Bavaria. We haven't done that yet. The Mass and Focus Advanced Chapter 8 Challenge, which was on Bavaria. We haven't done that yet. And the last two past HSC, which we haven't done yet. These things that I've starred here, that's what I want us to try and get done periods 3 and 4 today. Okay, that's the focus. And I'll start this bit too. Okay. Before we start, we've gone through this topic very, very quickly. Yesterday in one period, we basically went through the whole of bivariate data, which is a whole topic. So there's a lot of content that we covered. What I'd like us to do is spend a bit of time just on page 1 and 2. There's the syllabus there. I would like you to spend a bit of time reading through the dot points and check that you understand everything that's going on in the syllabus. If you don't understand anything in a particular way, I'd underline it or highlight it. Okay, so yeah, just spend a bit of time reading through. But one thing I want to say is that we haven't yet covered the last, I think probably 2 dot points is what we're going to be covering in this lesson. So read through everything except for the last 2 dot points. Okay, pause the video and give yourself a bit of time to do that. Okay, hopefully you've had a bit of time to read through that and underline or highlight anything that you want to ask me next week. If you have any queries about any of what the dot points are saying. Hopefully, though, we've covered everything quite well, I believe. It's an easy topic because it is shared with standard. However, you still need to make sure we cover it properly. I want to talk about the last 2 dot points, so let's read the second last dot point. So, implement the statistical investigation process to answer questions by identifying, analyzing, and describing associations between 2 numerical variables. So, the key thing that puzzled me for a while is what do they mean by statistical investigation process, and I had to do a bit of searching, and eventually I found the answer to that, and we'll go through that today. I haven't covered it properly in the notes, but we'll make that correction. We'll add a bit to the notes. And the last dot point, construct, interpret, analyze scatter plots for bivariate data in practical context. We've actually done that, but this is the bit that we haven't really talked about. Issues of privacy, bias, ethics, and responsiveness to diverse groups and cultures. Okay, I'm really not sure how they're going to ask HSC questions on this. A lot of it's common sense. Definitely issues of privacy when you're sharing your personal information through surveys and things. Definitely issues of bias. If, for example, the common example of bias I give is that imagine you want to find out what mode of transportation people take to work, and you hand out a survey at the train station. Well, of course, it's going to be biased that more people catch the train. More subtle ones is doing questionnaires over the internet. You're going to get the opinion of younger people because the older generation don't use the internet to fill out surveys as much. Things like that. Ethical issues kind of lines up a little bit with privacy. And responsiveness to diverse groups and cultures. So making sure that if you want to collect information on the whole population, that each culture is represented sufficiently within your data. Okay, so all that should be intuitively obvious, but it's there as a dot point, and I'm not sure how they would ask a HSC question on it. It would have to involve some words. Okay, let's flip to page 30, the statistical and investigative process. Now, it took me a while to find the steps involved in the statistical investigative process, and what I noticed was different textbooks said different things. So I made an attempt which I put on your notes, but I've seen that NEST has actually given us the statistical process in 4 steps, and they do it in the standard syllabus, not the advanced syllabus, which is why it was missing. I don't know why it's missing from the advanced syllabus, but it is. So these are the 4 steps. Maybe we can pause the video and you can copy these down. So first step, identify the problem and pose a statistical question. So there's got to be a reason why you're asking the question, and a statistical question collects data. Step number 2, collect or obtain data. Collection would represent primary, and obtaining would represent a secondary source. You're obtaining from something that's already been done. So basically step number 2 is basically about you collecting primary or secondary data. Collect or obtain data. Step number 3, represent and analyze the data. I'll talk more about step number 3. I've got a lot of notes on step number 3, essentially. And after you've represented and analyzed the data, you need to communicate and interpret your findings. How does the data help you address the problem? So communicate and interpret findings. So that's the 4 steps. You can see that my steps are slightly different. I'm missing the identify problem and pose a question. And I've gone straight to collecting the data. So we can collect the data in form of a census or a survey. And also note that if we're collecting its primary, data, if we're obtaining from some other source that's already there, that's secondary data. From a secondary source. So secondary source. Okay, think to your history days, primary sources and secondary sources. So census is data from a whole population, and the whole population doesn't need to be everyone in the whole world. It could just be whatever population you're looking at. So you could do a census of, say, for example, the school, get information from everyone in the school, etc. When taking a sample, the data gathered must be representative of the entire population. Otherwise, the information collected would be biased towards a particular outcome. So it's really important if you're getting a sample to make sure it's a fair sample, so it's not biased to a particular outcome. Now the next 3 things I wrote there, I think they all come under the represent and analyze data. So to represent and analyze the data, you need to organize the data first. Okay. Then you need to summarize and display the data to help you analyze it. So information must be well organized, easy to understand, often displayed using graphs, and summarized using summary statistics, for example, mean, median, mode, etc. And analyze the data is the last part of step number 3, which means interpret. What does this data tell me? Okay, so if you're looking at bivariate, things like direction and strength of the association will need to be determined, the correlation coefficient determined in an analysis of the data to see if there is a connection between the 2 variables you're looking at, if you're looking at 2 variables, if you're looking at bivariate data. And the last step there, which I haven't written, is communicate and interpret findings. So it's basically create a summary of what you have in order to address the problem. And as already mentioned, we need to talk about ethical issues such as bias, accuracy, copyright, privacy. All these terms you should be aware of what they mean. So bias is an unfair skewedness, gives weight to a particular result more than others. Then is fair. For example, a survey about favourite music but only completed by teenagers would be biased. Privacy, the ability for an individual to control their own personal data. So that's privacy. I haven't got any questions on this, and to be honest, I would find it very hard for them to write a HSC question that wasn't in the form of like an essay for you to like write down the steps. But just be aware of the steps. I think it's important that you write down the 4 steps there and be aware. Hopefully they're logical. They should make sense. You need a problem to get a question, to get data. So step 2, you collect and obtain the data. Then you represent and analyze that data, and then you communicate your findings, okay? And then interpret your findings. So what I'd like you to do, work on 19.5 is to do with this, and also 11.1, back at 11.1. So complete those, and then you're essentially working through this list. You should have already have done the first 4 of those. So you got these 2 past HSC. You should have already done the chapter 7 Maths and Focus. So you should be working on 15D there, this one and this one. In terms of Friday, if you can get all this done today, excellent. On Friday, I'd be working on going back 2 topics and working on this HSC stuff that's still lingering from a few weeks ago, getting that maximum, minimum 3-hour past HSC stuff going, and the rates of change as well. Rates of change is short; it shouldn't take you too long, but the maximum min will take you a while. I really want this out of the way now, so can we make sure we get this done? If not tomorrow, finish it over the weekend, or get as close to finishing it over the weekend as possible. Okay, so that when we have our next class on Tuesday, all this stuff's done, and we can start our new topic. Okay, which is integration. Our next topic is integration. Okay, so today 19.5, 11.1 shouldn't take too long. And then making sure you're finished off this whole topic. And then tomorrow, be working on those past HSC from 2 topics ago. And then we'll be fresh to start integration on Tuesday. All right, all the best.